All right. Is it Galiano? Gali? I've seen it said a couple of different ways.
Yeah, you call me either one, but my name's Galiano Tiramani from Boxable, and it's nice to meet you, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, no, I've heard of you through a couple of different lenses. One of a friend of mine is an investor and been following your journey. So excited to dig into this. For folks, I guess, for who are not familiar with you all, what is Boxable?
Yeah, so Boxable is a new way to mass produce houses. We are a factory that is building houses, essentially. If you just quickly check out our website, Boxable, boxabl.com, you'll see right away a video of the house and you'll get a good understanding of what we're doing. The thing that stands out to people is that the houses actually fold up, and they fold up so they can ship, and they need to be able to ship so that we can scale manufacturing and drive the cost down. And really, the idea here is that we would produce more housing faster and at a lower cost than anyone else has ever been able to do before.
Yeah. And my understanding is that part of the vision for this is you've spoken often about this idea of kind of the global housing crisis. Can you explain, maybe for people who just aren't familiar with what's going on with that, like what some of the issues are that are driving the problem and why Boxable could be a suitable solution to help address it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone hears that, rent is too high and housing is not available. And this is not just a problem in the US. This happens, all over the world. There's just housing issues, and there's really no way to make enough with the current methods, because no matter how much money you throw at it, there's only so many people out there, building houses. And the way they build it now, 90% of houses are built one at a time by hand out in the elements. It takes 6 to 8 months to build a house. And it's just really kind of an ancient way of doing things, when every other product is built on an assembly line with mass production. And we know those mass production principles work, and they just haven't been applied to housing because we think houses are just too big to ship. So by solving that shipping problem, we're now producing, just in our first factory, one house every 2 hours. And we think that in the next big factory, we'll get to one house every minute. And we think that's totally achievable with our technology, and just not even a big deal, because they do that with automobiles and they do that with other products.
Yeah, you mentioned the kind of the foldable nature of it, and I know that from what you said, it allows you to be more scalable than other people, and there are a couple of people that are trying to kind of solve for this, and it sounds like you're the only ones that have solved for that specific piece of it. Can you explain to folks why having the ability to fold the house matters so much from a logistical perspective, from a scaling perspective? Yeah.
So we wanted to ship rooms that don't really have compromise, like don't have low ceilings or narrow rooms. And those rooms can stack and connect to build many different building types, like almost every different building type. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the way they're doing it now in the factory built housing that does exist and has been around for a while is they ship these oversized loads. They're essentially illegal loads. They need special permits, and with special permits comes extra cost. Mm-hmm. Also, you get restricted routes, restricted travel times, the requirement to have a follow car. So like, for example, if you're shipping a traditional modular house that's over wide, you're going to have the house with the truck with the house on it. And then you're going to have another car behind it with flags on it, kind of leading the way. And then all of a sudden you have two drivers and two trucks, and the costs just explode. And it doesn't make sense. And you can't really, scale that. And you certainly can't ship more than a few hundred miles from the factory.
Mm-hmm. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. So, I'd be curious to learn. I always kind of like to get into the early days and almost sort of like the MVP kind of aspect of it. And my understanding is that you started with what you called kind of an R&D lab, or kind of a smaller factory, to kind of come up with how you would address some of this stuff. Can you try to think back to those days and what did you kind of learn going through that process? Like, how long did it take to arrive at the final design? Maybe what were some of the lessons that you learned about? A lot of the people that listen to this kind of come more from like a tech background. And so cycle time and fast iteration is really easy to do with software. I would imagine it's quite a bit harder with technology or with physical products. What did you learn maybe going through that process, trying to get to the MVP of something this complex?
Yeah, I mean, well, the truth is, we're still not done with the design and the innovation.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a next gen of the product, just like there's a new iPhone every year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already on like the fourth generation of the Boxable product. But from the beginning, it was a tremendous learning curve and a tremendous amount of R&D and testing. I basically went through every different building material, building system under the sun. I watched, endless videos on the internet. I went visited manufacturers. I called companies up and asked them weird questions about their product and just tried to find the different angles that would make things different and more efficient and faster and higher quality and meet all the ratings that we need to make. And, what we're building with, these are not traditional building materials. It's not a lumber frame, stick frame construction with wood and nails that you would see in North America. We're using all different stuff. And there's a bunch of different reasons why we're using this different stuff. And there's different requirements. And frankly, they don't all align. Like you have to make the house energy efficient. It has to be structurally strong. It should be lightweight. It should be fire resistant. And making one product that serves all of those things is not easy. You have to really dial it in. Mm-hmm. But what we've come up with is just amazing. And, it keeps getting kind of better and better. And we're really excited with the trajectory of the product. Mm-hmm. But, back in the day, it was just basically myself, my dad, Paolo, and another guy named Kyle Denman. And we just had a little shop and we were just messing around in there, building stuff, testing stuff. And eventually we decided, all right, we're ready. And we're ready to go out with this product. We got a big first order and then we set up a huge factory. And basically, a year ago now, we got up and running in this first factory. It's 170,000 feet. We got an order for 156 houses from the Department of Defense. We got in there. We installed all this equipment, just not common equipment, new manufacturing methods, new materials. We hired several hundred people and just went for it. And we managed to pull it off, and we delivered that order in less than a year. Now we're opening a second factory. So it's just been a wild ride. And, even those first 156 houses, the truth is those were all prototypes. Yeah. Like we went from the first gen of the product or whatever gen it was into that next gen that was the production gen. But we didn't even build one prototype with that method. We immediately went and ordered 156 of everything and just went for it. But it's all working out really well. And we've kind of pulled it off and executed and delivered on all the promises. So we're amped up and things are taking off.
A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with kind of getting those early believers, especially from like a client perspective. And go back to, you walk into the Department of Defense. How did you go about closing that deal when you didn't have a factory yet? You didn't have, it sounds like you had maybe something of a prototype, but it wasn't vaporware necessarily, but like you were selling the dream clearly. What was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, the stars really aligned for that. A lot of things went right. There was a little bit of luck in there, and there was certainly a lot of persistence. Yeah. And that's really what it takes. Just keep trying and trying and trying. And at that point, we had the one prototype, and that was it. We had a very small warehouse building. And what I was doing every day is basically, doing marketing to drive traffic to the website to get people to find out about it, capturing the leads, mm-hmm. and then following up with the leads. So I was on the phone like every day from when I woke up in the morning, from when I went to bed, like literally nonstop on the phone. Like I lost my voice. It was crazy. And I talked to everyone under the sun, and like a lot of people are just full of shit. And a million people made all these promises. Yeah. And when the first few times I heard the promises, I'm like, oh guys, we have this huge opportunity. And then crickets, nothing would happen. Yeah. But I learned you just had to keep going through these leads. And eventually one Saturday morning, I took a call with some guy who said that he was worked at a military base and had the ability to spend, tens of millions of dollars of the government's money. And then he wanted our houses. And I explained to him everything that was going on. And then I just went on to my next call and I thought nothing of it because at that point I was so used to hearing bullshit. And then it turns out a few weeks later, he called back and he was the real deal. Wow. So, after just always giving everyone, the time, a little bit of time, the opportunities started to come up. And, that was a big one. And that changed our trajectory because when we got that order, we were planning a factory that was a much smaller factory. And when we got the order, we said, this is not going to work. We're not going to be able to deliver this in their time frame with this smaller factory. So then we just said, fuck it, let's go huge. And we went crazy, and we got into this huge building, 170,000 feet, with not enough money, with no experience, no resources, no track record, convinced everyone to sign on, convinced the government to sign on, convinced the owner of the warehouse building to lease us the building, which is unusual as well. I mean, and then we pulled it off. So it's pretty crazy.
What were, I guess it's kind of like a burn the bridges kind of moment. Like you had to go for it. How did you learn as quickly as you did? Because you mentioned, like, not only are you innovating on materials, like I know you're using like foam and as insulation, which is kind of a novel decision, and there's reasons why you did that. And you mentioned a bunch of the materials are different, and the manufacturing processes were different. Like, how did you, when you have so many gaps in terms of what you're trying to kind of piece together, and you have such a limited time frame to kind of pull it off, how did you rely on experts to try to help kind of fill in gaps? Like, how did you get up to speed so quickly once you were all in?
We had a small team. Everyone worked really hard. We basically just went crazy and spent a lot of hours doing a lot of research. At a certain point, we figured out what the plan was for the factory, what the manufacturing equipment was, what all the material was. And then before we pulled the trigger on a lot of it, we did bring in an expert, which was Porsche Consulting. So like the car company Porsche, they do consulting for manufacturing. And we got them in. They looked at everything we did. They made some suggestions, and roughly everything we planned made sense. And then we just went forward. They took a few weeks, and aside from that, it was just a bunch of guys figuring it out. And the truth is, we can't. There's no known method for what we're doing. So really, there's no one that can tell us what to do except us. I mean, this isn't even automobile manufacturing, even though that's very hardcore. That's a known thing, and they do it with established methods. What we're doing is just all new, totally made up. Everything's crazy. The one of our key employees is actually a guy I met through Craigslist when I moved to Las Vegas. I was looking for someone to help me move in and hang and mount TVs on my wall. So I met this guy, and he was a solid guy, really, really impressive, great work ethic. And he's now basically manages the entire factory. So that's just an example of someone who knew nothing about Boxable or building houses or mass production, and just figured it all out and learned it and excelled. And now it's just really doing it. But things are getting better because now we have more funding, we have more resources, we're bringing in experts. We now have manufacturing engineers. We now have people with relevant experience. So we're pulling together a team of people with expertise versus when we started, it was just a team of guys figuring it out.
If you were to, like, knowing what you now know, if you were to either do it over again, or if you had a friend that came to you and was planning on building a manufacturing type of business, what would your advice be to someone that's trying to navigate through that whole process? It's a pretty different way of things. You haven't done it before. I would imagine the learning curve is huge.
Yeah, I mean, with all of this kind of stuff, it's just you just need like really brutal persistence. Like you just need to just not give up no matter what, and keep hammering away and keep making lots of small decisions that are the right decisions. And eventually they add up, and eventually they pay off, and eventually it kind of snowballs. But for us, one big thing that I figured out how to do early on was the marketing. And it's just been so valuable. Being out there in the public and having people find out about this is something that I would repeat in other companies and I hadn't done before. And it's just about driving resources and opportunities. So because so many people are finding out about us, because of, the Elon Musk press this morning, because of the other social media influencers and all the followers and the web traffic, we have like nonstop resources pouring into the company that we get to just farm. So whether it's an investor, a customer, a potential employee, a supplier, all these people are just flowing in through the website, saying, oh, we have this for you, we have this for you. And then we're sitting here getting all the best of all these opportunities. And that's what's driven this whole thing. And we wouldn't be here without the marketing. So, the marketing plus a really solid product has allowed us to have a crazy trajectory.
I mean, along those lines, the obviously the product itself plays a huge role in terms of the word of mouth kind of aspect of it. It's a novel idea. The house folds up. It catches your attention immediately. But was there anything, because my understanding is you've primarily been using organic channels to do this marketing. What have you learned? And like, you're doing like, I noticed like you're kind of almost doing like the Gary V, like I'm documenting rather than creating and some of that kind of stuff. Like, what have you learned about kind of grassroots marketing or organic marketing as a mechanism to kind of build up all of this interest, other than the fact that you just have a legitimately cool product?
Yeah, I mean, basically all you have to do to sell anything, it seems like, is, drive the views somehow, then capture those leads so that you have them either through a pixel or a web form or an email, and then just remarket to those leads. And if you can scale that up, it just becomes a numbers game. So what I did was we had a really big success early on when we found a YouTuber with a relevant channel about housing and had her do a video on us. And I just reached out one day because I was chasing down traditional press like local news and not getting anything out of it. And it didn't work well. And I was like, oh, man. So then I'm like, all right, I'll try a YouTuber. So I went to the YouTuber. I was like, hey, you want to do a video? She's like, sure. We did the video. And all of a sudden, boom, web traffic's up, inquiries are up, form submissions are up. I'm like, all right, I'm onto something here. And then I kind of just went crazy with it and doubled down and reached out to thousands of people and kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And then stuff starts to happen organically because other people, they all want content and they all want, views. So if they see something that's cool and it's going to get them the views, they'll do it. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. And now we're getting, people with bigger and bigger followings talking about us. And that just pays off. Eventually.
I know also you leveraged, it seems like you're leveraging a crowdfunding model, at least for part of the fundraise. Obviously, your capital requirements are a lot bigger than what you can do through that alone. But I would imagine that factored in the strategy as well, because it seems like a lot of the content, again, especially like the documenting versus creating kind of thing. Yes, there's a degree of polish to the content that you're creating, but it almost seems like it's accomplishing multiple goals. Like you're educating new people about it, but you're also keeping your believers, either people who are on the wait list or people who decided to invest via the crowdfunding, abreast of what's going on, and it makes them feel more ownership for it. And I know that's how I keep getting the updates from people who invested in it, and that's how I found out about it. And was that a deliberate process, or did you know that would be something that would happen behind that? Was that why you did the crowdfunding, or like what was kind of the impetus for that piece of it?
I didn't know any of this would happen, and it's all just kind of evolved, and I've learned quickly, and I've doubled down on things that work. The community that we're building is crazy, though. We now have a Facebook group with Boxable investors on Facebook. This is a group created by a third party that now has 8,000 members. These guys are so active. They're on there talking about it every day. When I go on there and comment, they're super excited to see me giving a shit enough to reply to them, and of course I do. And all of this is just amazing. We also did the affiliate program on our website where people can market us and get a commission of the reservations, and it all of it just contributes. And that's one benefit of the crowdfunding is we basically have this group of cheerleaders now. It's 20,000 people. They've invested over $110 million. We've set records, and these guys are out there talking to us and telling more people. And you're right, they're coming back for more. A lot of these people are investing now again and again as they see us actually doing what we say we're going to do and actually delivering. Because a lot of this crowdfunding stuff can be kind of scammy sometimes and abusive. But the fact that we are actually like doing everything we said we're going to do, succeeding, doing it quickly, everyone's like taking a second look and they're like, all right, this is for real. And, a lot of people at the beginning were like, this guy's full of shit. He's making all these grandiose claims. But now we're kind of proving them all wrong. So they're coming back around, and it's been like just huge. The crowdfunding, I don't see any
Yeah.
downside to it at all. Any downside I've heard is basically could be debunked. It's allowed me to remain in complete control, Paolo and I to remain in complete control of the company, call all the shots, get the best terms, cut out the middleman, give ourselves leverage for deals with the big boys later on. Because you're right, we can't raise billions of dollars through crowdfunding, but we will need billions of dollars. And the problem we're trying to solve can command that. But now when I go to these bigger guys, I have all this leverage because I'm like, well, look, this is what the market is actually assessing us at, and they're signing on in droves. So it's
I mean, raising 100 million
crazy.
I mean, that's more than I would have imagined. Was there anything that you, I guess, a lot of my students at Kellogg, for example, like they factor crowdfunding or they think that crowdfunding is going to be a piece of their kind of early success. Any advice you'd give to founders that are contemplating exploring a crowdfunding model, like how to do it well, pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah. If you have a product that a lot of people can relate to and understand, or you even have access to a community where you're going to find the people that are interested in what you're doing and you can tap into that, just do it. I mean, there's really no downside to it. You can now do a Reg CF offering, which does not require qualification from the SEC, so there's no waiting. You just go and do it, and you put it out there. I would say try to get it directly on your own website versus on one of these platforms, because then you can control the traffic, you control the remarketing and the whole sales process. And, give it a try. Worst case that happens, you only get a little bit of money instead of a lot of money, and that's it. And, I just, when I was trying to raise money early on and talking to these other kind of institutional investors, I just was met with this just very kind of abrasive arrogance and condescending stuff, and people who didn't understand what I was doing, telling me why it sucked. And, now that I look back at it, I'm like, these people weren't even qualified. They didn't even necessarily have any real world business experience like I do. And they didn't know what they were talking about, but somehow they got in control of this money for someone else. And the way they were looking at things just didn't make sense. They're all obsessed with valuation. And the problem when you beat up a founder about valuation, you're either going to get, one of a few things. If a founder is going to give the company away for a low valuation, it shows that they don't believe in the company because they don't see an upside in holding on to the valuation. Then the founder is just going to basically, rip you off, waste the money, blow it on a salary. And I don't think that's a good strategy for these VCs to be obsessed with the valuation, because what they're looking for is a 10 or 20x return. Whether they pay a 10 million valuation or a 12 million valuation, it's not going to really affect it if it's serious. And the other thing was, a lot of the offers we did get early on basically were trying to get us to give up control of the company to these people we didn't even know, and we were like, no, we're not doing that. And we didn't just come with an idea either. Like, we put our own money into this. Paolo put several $1 million into this before we took a dime from investors. So we were committed. We spent years on it. We weren't just coming with an idea and asking for money. But crowdfunding is huge. It's becoming more and more popular. It makes more and more sense. And it's pretty cool too, because the potential here is that, I make, thousands of people rich. That's like awesome. That's like epic. If that's really cool. Happen.
So you got the prototype, you shipped it to the Department of Defense, you got the factory. Now you're kind of in scale mode, I guess, for lack of a better word. I would imagine that there's a whole new set of problems that you're encountering. So, like, for example, like different cities or different states and things that have different codes and all that kind of stuff. Like, how have you navigated? Like you said, how do you build a unit and mass produce it and accommodate all of the different nuances that you're going to run into from a legislative perspective or regulatory perspective?
Yeah, on that front, there's a lot of problems there. And one of the reasons that housing is so expensive is that it's extremely highly regulated. Like, it's absurd what they do. And they do it because it's a big tax center for them. Property taxes funds all the local governments. So, of course, they have to give themselves an excuse to exist. So they're torturing everyone. Like there's no other modern product where you put this product in and you have an inspector out from the city 3 or 4 times during the setup of the product. Like that's just, it's crazy. And then the permitting fees and the restrictions and all these very specific rules about shape and size and setbacks. Frankly, it's really sad to me because we're supposed to be free country, free people, but you can't even own property in this country. You can't even own your own house. You might think you own your own house, but you're always paying rent back to the government because of property taxes. And that just kind of sucks. But all that stuff aside, the Boxable is shortcuts that a little bit because we go through the state programs where they have these state modular programs. We get inspections done in our factory by a third-party private company, not the city. And we get the plans approved at the state level. So before a local building department even sees a proposal to put a Boxable somewhere, it's already signed off. Building department's already signed off. Inspections already signed off, all of it. So that shortcuts things. We are going through that process now. We do have to go state by state, which is not good. There's a federal program as well, but the federal program has some drawbacks. It's traditionally for like trailer park, double wide type of homes. We will qualify for that, and we will be in that program as well to give people options. But we're working through it, and I think that right now it's not a big deal because there's so much demand. If some place gives us a hard time, we will go somewhere else. There's plenty of people who want housing and who are going to be friendly to it. But once we really scale up, we will have to fight back a little bit about this stuff and try to reform it, kind of the same way you would see like Uber fighting back against these cronyism taxi laws in places, and maybe Airbnb, and they're all kind of fighting against these regulations too. But that's another fight for down the road.
It does seem it seems like it'd be a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient for the state and local governments, knowing that they only have to kind of prove it one time in the factory, and now that they know they don't have to go out every single time, it seems like there's an incentive there, at least for a municipality that cares about budgets and things like that, which maybe they don't all care, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and really you're going from like kind of a very splintered industry where you have all of these little individual builders building things from scratch, which are dangerous. They are houses. And then all of a sudden you have this one big company with the quality control and the assembly line taking all of that out of the hands of the little guy. It can kind of become this national brand where it's well known, where it's accepted, where they see this plan for Boxable. They say, oh, that's good. I know about that. That's safe. It's not going to collapse on people. Versus Joe Schmo going out and building something in his backyard or whatever.
Right, makes a lot of sense. Along those same lines, I know you partnered, I think it was with D.R. Horton, which is like one of the larger, home building firms or experts kind of in the United States. Like, what have they brought to the table as you've been scaling, and what's been the strategic kind of thinking behind that partnership?
Yeah, they have been absolutely amazing, and I'm like blown away by it because I didn't expect that. I thought they would just kind of invest and disappear and fill their quota or whatever, but they are in our factory all the time. They are bringing us opportunities all the time. They've placed a 100-unit order, and they are deploying those, not worrying about making money, just worrying about helping us with product development and learning about installs. They're doing test units. They're hooking us into their supply chain, their mortgage stuff. I mean, they have been a huge ally and a huge validation because they know what makes sense with housing more than even I do, because they do it for real on a huge scale as the biggest builder in the country. So the fact that they're looking at what we're doing and saying, these guys are on something, we want in on it, it's just, it's massive. So we'll see how that partnership continues to develop. But
is there anything you learned through that process around identifying potential strategic partnerships and how to negotiate them and how to make sure it's a win-win, anything like that?
Well, with that one, I do a lot of outreach to potential strategic partners. I'm pretty sure the channel where we ended up really connecting with them, they kind of found us. So it kind of went back to that general marketing being so effective and bringing in all these opportunities. And I think that's where that came from with them. And then, I mean, it's been pretty easy with them. They came into the factory at first when we had nothing, just the building. And then, a few months later, it's all set up and we're building houses. And then at that point was when they pulled the trigger on the investment, because they said, all right, these guys are the real deal. So, but yeah,
cool.
it's been great.
A lot of startups, there's a lot of chatter around like building culture and being deliberate about building culture. And it seems like from some of your update videos and things like that y'all have a very distinctive culture. There's a lot of humor kind of there. You don't take yourselves too seriously. But I would imagine that there's some nuance in the sense of like, startup land, it's like people with ping pong tables and all that kind of stuff. And you've got like white collar startup-y type workers, but then you also have more blue collar people that are responsible for delivery and actually building the homes and things like that, who might not be used to, on the one hand, like a startup type of environment in terms of its informality or whatever it is. But on the other hand, like with hyper growth kind of ambitions and things like that, like what have you learned maybe about culture building and especially trying to marry two, I would imagine, pretty different types of people and getting them kind of on the same page and moving in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, they're all just people at the end of the day. And, some people like a structure and don't like unknowns, and some people don't mind it. So, we tell people when they start that there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff happening. There's going to be a lot of figuring stuff out. There's going to be a lot of wearing different hats. And whether that happens in the office or in the factory, it's kind of the same thing. And some people can't handle it, and we kick them out quickly. But the people that can handle it, they're the ones you want, because they're the ones putting in the extra effort. They're the ones really thinking, really working hard, really bringing more to the table, and not just coming in and punching a clock kind of thing. So it's been great. We do bi-weekly lunch with everyone where we cater food, and then everyone, factory and office, kind of sits together. But we all work together because it is a factory at the end of the day. So even the office people are involved with factory stuff. So, but it's been fun, and we try to make things funny and entertaining, and take care of everyone, and treat people properly. I don't think that a lot of manufacturing, they kind of leverage abusing the laborers by like really getting them at the lowest pay and squeezing every dime out of them. And I don't think that's sustainable. If our business can't work if our business can't work while paying everyone properly and treating everyone fairly, then I don't want to do it. It's not going to be a long-term thing. So what's going to get us into, success is a great product and a great cost structure and all that. But yeah, we do a lot of funny stuff. I've always, my whole life, done a lot of funny, weird stuff, not really very traditional. And that's all good. And it all kind of contributes. Yeah,
along similar lines, it's pretty unusual to see, again, kind of a hyper growth kind of startup that is also kind of a family business. And you and your father mentioned work together. I don't know if you worked together before or if this is your first time, but what have you learned about working with family? What advice would you give to folks that are considering starting a business with family? Seems like a pretty unique opportunity, but also a pretty unique challenge.
I mean, it's great. I mean, what else could you ask for? I have kids. I can't imagine growing up and working with my own kids. Obviously, it's amazing. Paolo and I have done a few projects before in the past, but mostly done our own things, and then kind of came back together on this project. I was up with another business in Northern California, and he had just moved to Las Vegas. And, we were talking one day about the folding house idea, and we said, let's give it a shot. Let's make a website. Let's make some 3D models and see if we can get any traction. And we just started working on it, and it took off. And eventually, I decided this is the big opportunity. Let's dump this other business and go to Vegas and work full time on Boxable. And, he did the same thing. And then we just kept dumping more and more resources into it. But it's really great. We get along really well. We have complementary skill sets. He's more on the design and engineering and strategy side. I'm more on operations and sales and marketing and business development and capital raising and all that kind of thing. So really, really fun, really awesome to have, a partner in this that I'm so well aligned with. And can trust, of course, and all that good stuff. So it's amazing. Every day, pretty much, I'm like sitting here like I don't even believe that that the world is real anymore. I fully believe that we're living in a simulation and that this is all just made up just because things are so crazy for me.
That's so cool. Yeah, my understanding is that as you're planning to kind of scale the thing further, that you're looking at pursuing kind of more of a like a partner factory, almost like a franchise model to accelerate expansion, I would imagine. But what are kind of some of the variables that kind of drove that decision? I don't know to what degree you already have some partners lined up or franchisees lined up. Maybe what have you learned in the early days of that process? It's kind of an interesting decision.
Yeah. So within the U.S., we will operate and control all the factories. I think that's a no-brainer. Hopefully, end up with 4 or 5 really big ones that can cover the whole U.S. But internationally, it's just a whole crazy learning curve, and we just didn't think it made sense for us to go to Brazil and set up a factory there and learn all the local laws and local customs and local tweaks. And we thought, this is housing. The product we're engineering works everywhere from a requirements point of view. We want to scale this thing up really fast. This is a huge problem everywhere. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And, if we get the formula perfect here, we'll just basically hand that over to big companies in other countries and say, here you go. Sign on to this kind of franchise program. We'll send you the equipment. We'll hook you into the raw materials, our quality control, our branding, our sales pipeline, all of it. You bring in your own money, your own local expertise, and you guys execute. And then by doing it that way, I think that we're going to be able to go from 1 or 2 big factories in the U.S. to 10, 20, 100 factories around the world, like really, really fast. And, this is something that everyone can get behind, like including governments, because governments are very involved with housing, and a lot of politicians run on housing, and there's a lot of funding behind it. And the whole entire banking system of the whole world is integrated with housing and mortgages. So, this is something where we are going to get the big guns in here once we prove out the basics to blow this thing up, because the opportunity to destroy the price of housing and help a lot of people.
I know that IP tends to be a pretty important factor in franchise models because you're giving them the playbook, and so effectively your IP is the value in a lot of cases, the brand and all that kind of stuff. What have you learned? I guess I know you all have. I think you have like a couple dozen patents at this point. A lot of it related to kind of the manufacturing process itself and all of that kind of stuff. But what have you learned about the intellectual property side of things, how that factors into pursuing a franchise model, especially as you go international and you have different governments that may respect intellectual property to a greater or lesser degree? What have you learned from that stuff?
Yeah, so Paolo's previous business for like the past 30 years was intellectual property licensing and invention. So he would basically invent products, design them, patent them, and then license or sell the patent to other companies that would actually manufacture and sell them. So he's an expert in creating defendable IP. And, we do have a big patent portfolio, filings, trying to do that in all the important countries around the world. Patents don't really just like protect you 100%, but they give you the threat of a lawsuit. So, all it does is someone can knock you off and they can try to work around the patents, but they just have to realize if this company has the patents, there's going to be a lawsuit. It's going to have teeth. It's going to take time. There's a big downside. So it's just basically a big, scary threat. And that's all it is. And there are workarounds and there are countries that don't respect it and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I'm not even worried about that because it's just a small part of our strategy to protect the company. We also have, a tremendous brand. We have a tremendous head start. There's a huge barrier to entry for this. Anyone else that wants to get involved in this, they're going to need hundreds of millions of dollars. And anyone that's going to put down hundreds of millions of dollars is going to maybe not risk it by blatantly violating patents. And then the other thing is, even if you looked at all our patents and even if you took a house today and dissected it and took the whole factory and dissected it, guess what? We're already a step ahead. So the next gen of the product and the next gen of the factory, by the time you copied what we're doing now, we're already going to be way ahead of you and you're going to be way behind. So you can create an inferior knockoff product, and I'm sure it'll happen in China. And then there's another thing too. Again, these are big houses. You can't make them in China and ship them here. They're too big to ship cost effectively, from China. There's just a lot of different reasons. Another thing is the government regulations, the approvals, the permitting. If you knock this off in China and shipped it to the U.S., you wouldn't be able to actually deploy it and build it in most places because you wouldn't have all the permits you need and the modular program. So I think we're just in an incredibly strong position, and nobody really gets the full vision yet. Like, a lot of people are looking at this as like a tiny house company, and it's not. We have a vision where we'll be able to build almost all building types on the planet, and there's a lot of work left to be done. And for now, we're the only ones who can do that work because we're the only ones so deep in this that we get.
How do you, so along those lines, over the next 10 years, it sounds like, you have your Casita prototype and, you've brought your own version 4 or whatever it is, but it sounds like your long-term ambitions are that these are kind of plug and playable and that you can create literally any building type with it. What are some of the things, and I would imagine that's what you're spending a lot of your time kind of thinking about or trying to solve for at this point. What are some of the challenges that are resonant in that? Or like, what are some of the final bosses that you have to kind of beat to kind of achieve your grand vision for this thing?
Yeah. So right now, we spent the last few months just going crazy, getting this government order done at all costs to make it happen and pull that off. Now we're able to take a breath. There's no more impending deadline, and we're able to dial everything in. So we are here, dialing in all the stations in the factory. We're doing the next gen of the product. We're getting new manufacturing equipment. So in the next 6 to 8 months, we have about another $10 or $15 million of manufacturing equipment coming in. We've simplified the product design massively to reduce costs through just smart engineering and sourcing and all that. And basically, we need to massage this thing in to profitability, which we have a clear path to. And then at that point, I think it's going to kind of be game over because it'll still be at a really small scale. The product will be profitable. There'll be infinite demand for it. And then we'll say, all right, now we're ready to scale up. Now we're ready to go into different room sizes, different interior configurations, stack and connect, this $1 billion monster factory that I'm planning next. And we're close. We can see that point now where once we get there, anyone who looks at this is going to say, it's done. These guys have won. No one is going to be able to compete with this. Right now we make one wall panel for the house in about 20 minutes to a significant degree of completion. No one can do that in lumber or stick framing. In the next 6 to 8 months, that with the new upgrades we're doing, that's going to be 2 to 3 minutes per wall panel. So just at this early stage, very small, I still call this a prototype factory. If we're cranking out a full wall every 2 to 3 minutes, we're leagues ahead of everyone. So it's like really exciting every day. We continue to have like breakthroughs, and those aren't going to end. The innovation is not going to end forever. We're going to keep going with it. We're going to keep trying new building materials and methods and simplifying the design, reducing the part count, the components in the building. And, it's just really exciting.
It seems like you've really got like kind of tiger by its tail in a lot of ways here. And you didn't, like you said, it's kind of blowing you away in terms of how fast this has all happened. In venture, a lot of times there's this challenge when a company kind of hits hyper growth where the founder who started it isn't necessarily always able to kind of level up and be the kind of person to run it at the next level. And you all have control of the business still, so you don't have to necessarily worry about your investors saying like, hey, we need to, make a change or whatever it is. But I have to imagine that as you're thinking about how big this thing is going to probably get in the next few years, like it's still kind of incumbent upon you to kind of build skills and level up and things like that. Like, how have you done that so far, I guess, to get from where it was in the very beginning to where it is now? How have you continued to evolve as a leader, as an executive? And then, what are some of the things that you're trying to kind of plan ahead for or build in place so that you continue to be the right guy as this thing becomes even more massive?
Yeah, it's definitely been a wild ride, big learning curve. I think, your brain kind of is like a muscle, and the more you work it out, the stronger it gets. And, I'm dialing in all my various skills, trying to be very cautious to not create any landmines for us. And, we do intend on bringing in like a full kind of executive team of experienced individuals, especially when we go into the public market. But for now, I think we have so much left to give to this to kind of realize the vision. But I'm sure we'll get to a point where our input is not as valuable anymore and it's kind of takes on a life of its own. But for now, we have a really small core team and we're hitting out of the park on a lot of fronts. And, we're all growing our management skills. Like I've had employees before, but I've never had a team this big. So that's a new thing to experience. And even just the levels of bureaucracy that are actually become required at some point when you get bigger, as much as I hate it, you do need like rules and regulations and standards and procedures and all that. So, getting all that massaged into place, it's been great. And, slowly bringing in the help and the experts to take things off my plate so that I can focus on the stuff I'm really good at and not waste my time on stuff that I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Feels great as well.
Listen, I want to respect your time. It's pretty amazing what you've managed to do and in a pretty brief period of time. And it sounds like, your best days are ahead. For folks that maybe want to learn more, maybe want to get involved in some way, where can we send them?
Yeah, definitely check out the website, boxabl.com, boxable.com. Go to our YouTube. We have our latest factory update video on there announcing Factory 2. Our Instagram is really active. We post nonstop action on there. We have factory tours anytime you want. Come to Vegas. It's a nice trip. And then you can check out the casita, check out the factory. We do tours every day. And please, reserve a casita, put your name on the wait list, submit any other thing that you think you want to contribute into the website. And please, stay tuned and we'll keep trying to build
cool,
houses.
Well,
and
congrats on your
everyone.
success so far and look forward to continuing to see the journey. And just really, really impressive what you've been able to do. So congrats. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.